All right, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for attending. This is our pedestrian safety event, and we have Ms. Kate O'Connor from the Brain Injury Alliance who's going to put on this awesome presentation that I feel is really much needed, especially this month and beyond, just to keep our pedestrians safe and just to give you, little background on what that is like and, different safety tips that you can continue to follow, when you're out, when you're crossing the street, and when you're being a pedestrian, and even when you're driving, I'm sure. So I hope you enjoy. It's going to be recorded if you needed to refer back to this program at a later time. And I'm going to give the floor to Miss Kate.
So, hi everyone. My name is Kate O'Connor, and I work for the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey. And we are a nonprofit that helps improve the quality of life for anyone who's impacted by a brain injury. And we do this by providing support and advocacy and any information that we can, while also promoting brain injury prevention, which is what I'm doing here today. So we work with anyone who has sustained a brain injury as a result of a crash. And in transportation safety, we often talk about fatalities, but our organization knows that not everyone dies. We often have people that we meet that survive with life-altering injuries from a transportation crash, whether that's a pedestrian crash or a car crash. So why are we here today? Brain injury is a leading cause of death for disability in children and young adults, and motor vehicle crashes is the #1 cause of brain injury in teens. And I don't think a lot of people know this. I certainly didn't know this for many years. And in addition to that, we have 2 times the national average for pedestrian fatalities in New Jersey, which is unacceptable, which is why these programs are so important, because traffic safety affects every one of us. So what can we do as drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists to be safer on the road? Because it is a shared responsibility. And I think very few people truly understand this. Unless you've experienced a car crash yourself, there's actually one outside my apartment today on North Fullerton and Claremont. I was on a meeting and I heard a very loud noise, and that's kind of what it's like living in Montclair. For all of us who live here, we experience this on a kind of regular basis, whether that's almost getting hit by a car, seeing cars drive too fast. It's not a very safe town to live in when it comes to transportation safety. And I know this personally, not just from living in Montclair, but just from something that happened to my family. Didn't happen here. My brother Jimmy was 25 when he was hit by a taxi driver in 2012. He was getting out of another taxi on his way home from work. And his crash was caused for multiple reasons, because usually it's not just one reason why a crash happens, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. The taxi driver that hit him was distracted, speeding, and my brother was wearing dark clothing and was let out on the street side. So usually when someone drops you off, whether it's a taxi or a friend, they should let you out on the curbside. My brother Jimmy sustained a traumatic brain injury and spent 2 years in multiple rehab facilities before dying in 2014. Before Jimmy's crash, I never thought much about how I drove, walked, and I never paid much attention to transportation safety rules. But after going through my family's horrific journey, I quickly learned how common my story was. So I want everyone to take a look at these pictures. The critical reason that crashes occur is often the last failure in a causal chain of events leading up to the crash, right? It's not usually, one reason happened and that's why someone crashed. But you usually hear people say that, oh, I crashed because it was raining outside. Well, were you speeding and it was also raining? Did you hit a pedestrian because they came out of nowhere? Or were you also texting and then there was a pedestrian? There's usually more than one factor at play. And you hear me say the word crash and not accident, because in the transportation field, that's the term that we use, because most of these crashes are preventable. The number 94% is here, but it's probably much higher than that. So now we're going to talk about how we can be safer as drivers. So anyone on the call, what is the speed limit on Bloomfield Avenue? Can anyone tell me?
Isn't it like 25?
Yes, 25, right? And you probably know that, Ashley, because you're involved with health and you care about how you drive. But not everyone knows that. Maybe a decent amount of people know that, but not everyone knows that. It's 25 miles per hour, and town-wide, most areas is 25 miles per hour. And people who are traveling through might not know that either. And people tend to go a bit faster than 25 miles per hour on Bloomfield Avenue. I think many people would agree. And that's when it can get dangerous, because speed is set for a reason. And speed matters because in terms of how the crash happens, right? If you were to hit another car going a little bit faster, that crash is going to be a lot worse. But it also matters if you were to hit a pedestrian. So if you're going down Bloomfield Avenue and the speed limit is 25, and you're going, 20, 25 miles per hour, and someone is crossing on that crosswalk near Midland, which is a terrible crosswalk in my opinion, and you hit someone, 9 out of 10 people will survive a crash at 20 miles per hour. But if you're going closer to 40 miles per hour, which a lot of people do drive that fast on Bloomfield Avenue, which we know, only 1 out of 10 people will survive that crash. So that's why speed really does matter, especially when we're driving around Montclair and any other neighborhood for that matter, because a little bit of 10 to 15 mile an hour difference, even 5 miles per hour difference, makes a huge impact on someone's life. And I think a lot of us come to Montclair because we love the walkability that it offers. We love to be able to walk to restaurants, walk to stores, but we want to be able to do this safely. And we have to keep this in mind when we're driving and walking. So who is more likely to speed? Is there a type of person or an age? And what we see is that teen drivers, and maybe this might not be a shock for anybody, but teen drivers, they've done a lot of studies on this year after year, and they're definitely more likely to speed. And when they looked at their fatalities, teens who were involved in crashes over a 5-year period, 43% of them were speeding. So this is something to talk to your teens about. For anyone who is watching this, I know when I was younger, I definitely drove a lot faster, and mostly because I thought it was fun. I didn't really know the harms associated with it. So, and again, why are they more likely to speed, right? It goes back to that inexperience. When I talk to teens in high schools, I usually say, who here plays a sport? A bunch of kids will raise their hands, right? They're super excited. And say a kid raises his hand and he says, I play football. How long have you played football? 10 years. Okay. Are you ready to play for the NFL? No. Kids know that they're not professional athletes. But when you ask them if they're a professional driver, are they good at driving? They think they are after just a few months. So driving is just like any other skill. It takes years and years of practice. So it might help to use that analogy when talking to your child, or your teen, I should say. And also model good behavior. So if you're a parent and you're constantly speeding, constantly using your phone when driving, your teen is going to see this behavior and they're going to do it themselves. If mom and dad can do it, why can't I? So studies also found that teens who are involved in speeding have trouble with lane departure. So they speed out into the road and they go off into the other lane. This gets better with age, with more practice. Also, teens are more likely to be involved in a rollover crash. Again, they're not used to being involved, having that control of the car. So now for all ages. It wouldn't be a safety presentation without talking about impaired driving a little bit. So in the US, every 52 minutes, someone is involved in a drunk driving crash. And I think, everyone knows this. Everyone knows that drinking and driving is dangerous, yet almost everyone that I know has at one point in their life had too much to drink or more than they like to admit and gotten behind the wheel. Alcohol reduces the function of the brain, impairs your thinking, your reasoning, and your muscle coordination. And all of these things are needed to drive. So what they see a lot with driving is someone will maybe hit the brakes and they're already in the middle of the intersection. You have delayed reaction time. And now, especially with Uber and Lyft, there's really no reason why you can't call for a ride home. Same goes for high driving. The recent legalization of marijuana, a lot is unfolding with that now. But a lot of people think that it's safe to, smoke marijuana and drive. I hear a lot of parents say that, they smoked weed when they were younger and it's okay. The weed that was out back in the 70s and 80s is very different than the weed that is out now. I was actually on a webinar earlier today, and I got these numbers from a retired law enforcement. So THC, for those of you who don't know, is a psychoactive ingredient in cannabis. And this is what makes someone, impairs their judgment. And as you can see here in 2020, there's a 15.8% THC. And that's, average. It's not safe to drive when high. Try to get a ride home from someone and talk to your kids about this. What they see with a lot of people who are high while driving is they strike the vehicle in front of them. So now for distracted driving. What distracts you when driving? Just a rhetorical question. I think we all know that when we're behind the wheel, we're thinking about 1,000 things. For me, it's work, it's, what I have to do next when I get home maybe. And I know too, when I'm on the hands-free calling, that I'm also distracted. They've also done a lot of studies that hands-free calling is not any better than holding the phone up to your ear and talking on it. So try to set up your GPS ahead of time, because you may know that, texting and driving is bad. You'll never text and drive, but you still touch the GPS. You still, try to find a new playlist. You might tap your email at a light or maybe when you're driving. So all of these things are forms of distracted driving. Reaching in the back to grab your purse, trying to get the kids to calm down. You're not doing it to be a bad driver, but these things are all very dangerous behaviors. And I saw a study once that said men are bigger risk takers, but women are more likely to text and drive. So neither one of us are, the best driver, the safest drivers. Now that you've set up your GPS ahead of time or you're ready to go, everything is safe. When you're actually driving, you have to make sure that you are scanning for pedestrians at all time, okay? I think before, the tragedy that happened to my family, I don't think I ever actively looked for pedestrians. I used to wait until they were in my sight. Yes, once I saw a pedestrian, then I would stop for them, but I wasn't driving, scanning the roads for them. As a driver, I think many of us are trained to look for other cars, but we have to remember that we share the road with bicyclists, motorcyclists, cars, and pedestrians and skateboarders and everybody else who's on the roadway too. So scan for pedestrians, especially when turning. A lot of pedestrians get hit when cars are making right and left turns. And when you have the green arrow, as a driver, remember that pedestrians also have the walk signal a lot of the time. And this is when communication is very important as a driver and pedestrian. Try to make eye contact, wave the other person by. It really helps. It can go a long way with just knowing where each person is going. And just always try to focus on the road, right? This goes back to being distracted. On Claremont Ave, we're lucky to have a lot of those pedestrian blinking beacons that, you blink and then the pedestrian's there. You're not going to always have those everywhere you go. And a pedestrian shouldn't have to use those, right? You should just be able to cross in a crosswalk and a driver should let you go. But as a driver, I do see a lot of people actually use those blinking crosswalks and people still don't stop for them. And, I have friends that sometimes they genuinely don't see the pedestrian. So you have to get better at kind of retraining your brain to look for pedestrians. But then pedestrians also have to give drivers enough time to stop. So I do see pedestrians at the same time kind of walk out to the middle of the street and not give drivers enough time to stop, which is also a very dangerous situation. And, pedestrians can also be very distracted, which we're going to talk about in a second. And I wasn't always this way, right? It took me a long time to kind of train my brain. I'm going to mention this again, to drive this way and to kind of always be looking for people when I drive. And that's why teens, they're inexperienced drivers. It takes a lot of practice. Same goes for stop signs, right? A lot of us, New Jersey drivers, we barely stop at stop signs and we go. That's not an excuse. There could be pedestrians crossing, or you get stuck at a red light. Don't block the crosswalk. Talked about that. This is something that I really want to touch on. If you stop to let a pedestrian go, a lot of times, this happened to me a few times where I've stopped and then a car behind me goes around me. So if you see a random car that stopped, don't go around them because they could be letting a pedestrian go. So if this girl in the white is right in front of this white pickup truck, she could get hit by this Ford SUV. So, if you see a car stop, again, think, why are they randomly stopped in the middle of the road? Are they letting a pedestrian go? Don't just assume that they're stopped for no reason. Pedestrians get hit like this all the time. Okay, so now for pedestrians and cyclists. As pedestrians, try to use crosswalks if they're available and cross at corners. I know that's not always feasible. If your car is right there, you're going to cross for your car. But try, not to just go out into the middle of the street. Do the best that we can, but, use the crosswalks if they are there. Now, is distracted walking dangerous? Yes, right? We see people walking like this all the time with their heads down, which is very scary. If you're out on a sidewalk, sitting down, you could sit on your phone, have your headphones in, that's fine. But when you're crossing that short period in the middle of the street, keep your head up, because that's when you don't know if a car is turning. You have to be aware of your surroundings. 40 people on average are hit in Montclair every year, whether it's 40, 41, 42. And in 2018, 41 pedestrians were hit. And again, this wasn't an off year. This is pretty average in Montclair. Of the 41 crashes, 55% of them were in crosswalks. A lot of them where people were making those left-hand turns that I was talking about. Some people left the scene. Some of them were when crossing guards were deployed. So this is happening in our town. A lot of people like to think that it's not where, not where they live. I think a lot of us know that it is here because we experience it. But just keep that in mind when you are driving. We have to slow down. We have to be aware. These are people that we go to school with, that are in our grocery school, in our churches. We have to do better because this is unacceptable. This is 41 people getting hit each year is crazy to me. So some tips that I think a lot of people still don't know, this is what you're supposed to do. When you're walking and running, you're supposed to do that facing traffic. So if you're on the sidewalk, it's one thing, but if there's no sidewalk, you're supposed to do that facing the car. And that's so you can the car can see you and you can see them and you can kind of get out of their way, respectively if there's not enough room. And I want to see if someone's coming up to me, I want to be able to see them head on. And alternatively, if you're riding a bike, you should be riding in the direction of traffic because a bike is considered a non-motorized vehicle. It is very scary while riding a bike or as a driver if you're driving and a bike is coming at you this direction. Then again, when I was younger, I didn't know that you were supposed to ride a bike in the same direction as traffic. I felt safer, so I thought, to ride at cars so I could get away from the car if I had to. But with the flow of traffic for bikes and then walking and facing traffic for walking or running. Try to make yourself, it's just a tip, try to make yourself visible if you are walking or running, just to make yourself feel safer, okay? Drivers can be as safe as they want to be, but if you want to take that extra step for yourself, you know, you always see people who are serious cyclists and runners wearing really bright colors because they know how dangerous it can be. So they do sell these vests that are on the left that go over kind of any kind of jacket. On the crosswalk here, you could barely see the dad, but you see the two daughters in the pink. They sell reflective tape that can be added to your bike, your backpack. They even sell reflective dog leashes. That's my dog on the right. These charge and light up. They also have an app called PedSafe. And how this app works is all it does is makes your phone blink. So when you're crossing the street, you can either use your flashlight on your phone. I do that sometimes just so I have a little light, or you can touch the front of your phone and it'll blink. And the app is free. So when riding your bike, we talked about this, ride in the same direction as traffic. You're supposed to obey traffic laws, so stopping at red lights and stop signs, use hand signals so the drivers know where you're going, and have a light on the front and back of your bike. Also, it's always great to reduce brain injuries and just to keep yourself safe by wearing a helmet. I also see people wear helmets incorrectly a lot. You're only supposed to have 2 fingers exposed of your forehead. So it kills me when I see little kids, you know, have their whole entire forehead out or have it be really loose on the bottom. So, you know, if you have anyone in your life who wears a helmet, try to make sure that only 2 fingers is out, it's snug on the bottom, and the strap should form a V on the side. And lastly, if you care about these issues and you want to get involved, there is a nonprofit called Bike and Walk Montclair that is working to get the streets safer in our town. We're a nonprofit that advocates for policies, programs, and street designs. We also do a lot of fun stuff too. We do mobile socials the first Wednesday of every month. We just started them back up again, and we meet at Walnut Station at 6:30 at night. We do the Tour de Montclair, which some of you may be familiar with, and we just got our SAFE plan adopted into our master plan, which you could reach out to me if you want to learn more about what that is. We had a big petition that went around a couple months ago that some of you may be familiar with, but we're always looking for volunteers for our events. So definitely reach out to me through the Facebook. If this is being shared on Facebook, you reach out to me or Ashley. So I just want to wrap up with saying that all of us are affected by traffic safety, whether you bike, walk, drive, do all 3. All of us can be safer, and we kind of have to retrain our brain to think differently about traffic safety. And I believe that it's possible for everyone, no matter what age you are. It doesn't have to take a tragedy for us to do that. So thank you so much for your time today. I hope that someone somewhere gets a little something from this presentation. Again, my name is Kate O'Connor. I work for the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey. We have tons of resources for anyone who's been affected by a brain injury, whether it's you or your family. We do presentations on transportation safety, like this. We do bike safety, concussion presentations, and a slew of other presentations. So thank you again and have a great day.